According to the book of Acts, Saul was still breathing out murderous threats against the Lord's disciples when he had a transformative experience on the road to Damascus, a vision of the resurrected Jesus. It was that experience which allegedly changed everything. Saul became Paul and declared himself a freshly converted apostle of Christ. But there is a problem with this story. Paul can't quite get the details straight. It is considered a red flag when a person can't keep their story straight. When detectives work to solve a crime, they test witnesses on the consistency of their accounts. If the story keeps changing, suspicions arise. You might assume that a vision of Jesus would be memorable enough to stick in someone's memory, but the so-called Apostle Paul tells 3 different versions of his apparition on the road to Damascus, recorded in the book of Acts. In Acts chapter 9 verse 7, we find one account where Paul claims that his travel companions did not see Jesus, but heard his voice. And in Acts chapter 22 verse 9, we find another version of the story. They saw the light, but they did not understand the voice of him who was speaking to me. In one version, Paul is blinded for 3 days. In another, he makes no mention of such a thing. Having never met Jesus in the flesh, this is all he has to go on, and it just so happens that it cannot be verified by anybody. There is no mention of Paul in the Gospels by Jesus or anyone else for that matter. Nobody gives Paul the title of apostle other than Paul himself. The remaining 11 apostles set out to replace the fallen one from among them, Judas Iscariot, who betrayed Jesus. Praying for divine guidance, the men drew lots, and in the end, they reported that God chose Matthias to be the 12th disciple. Years later, Paul came along and inserted himself into the equation as the 13th disciple. Claiming to speak on behalf of Christ, Paul said, "For sin shall no longer be your master, because you are not under the law, but under grace." There is just one major problem with Paul's logic, though. According to the Gospel of Matthew, Jesus clearly commanded them to keep the commandments. "Think not that I am come to destroy the law or the prophets. I am not come to destroy, but to fulfill them." Jesus, the long-awaited Jewish Messiah, affirmed the message of the Hebrew prophets before him. He adhered to the Jewish law and never once indicated that the law of the Old Testament prophets would or should be abolished. In fact, he said, "It is easier for heaven and earth to disappear than for the least stroke of a pen to drop out of the law."
The men traveling with Saul stood there, speechless. They heard the sound, but did not see anyone. My companions saw the light, but they did not understand the voice of him who was speaking to me. We all fell to the ground, and I heard a voice saying to me in Aramaic, "Saul, Saul, why do you persecute me?"